Money has a way of turning family into strangers. I learned this truth while staring at my laptop screen, watching the numbers mock me from my banking statement. $5,000. Transferred from my personal account to an entity called Collins Holdings LLC, the same amount I supposedly paid Brandon for our apartment rent each month. Except we didn't have a lease, and I'd never heard of Collins Holdings LLC. I'm Jessica, and 6 months ago, I married into what I thought was the perfect family. Brandon Collins swept me off my feet with his charm and seemingly genuine desire to build a life together, separate from my family's wealth. My father's tech empire, Morgan Innovations, meant nothing to him, he'd said. He wanted me for me. Sweetheart, you're still working? Brandon's voice floated from our bedroom. It's almost midnight. I closed the laptop, my fingers trembling slightly. Just checking some numbers. He appeared in the doorway, shirt unbuttoned, hair slightly mussed. That familiar smile that once made my heart skip now made my stomach turn. Come to bed. Whatever it is can wait until tomorrow. Actually, I need to ask you something. I reopened the laptop, turning it toward him. What's Collins Holdings LLC? His smile flickered for just a fraction of a second. Most people wouldn't have noticed. But I'd spent the last 3 hours reviewing 6 months of transactions, and I'd learned to pay attention to details. Oh, that? He waved dismissively. It's just the company that manages the building. Dad set it up years ago for tax purposes. Why? Interesting. I scrolled through the statement. Because I've been transferring $5,000 every month to this company, but I've never signed a lease. And when I looked up Collins Holdings LLC tonight, it was registered 3 days before our wedding. The silence that followed felt like a physical presence in the room. Brandon's casual stance stiffened, his hand gripping the doorframe. Jess, you're making this sound suspicious when it's just business. Business? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Is that what we're calling it when you funnel my money into your family's secret company? You're being paranoid. He crossed the room, reaching for my shoulder. I jerked away before he could touch me. This is exactly why Dad wanted to handle the paperwork himself. You get so worked up about money? Don't! My voice came out sharp enough to make him step back. Don't you dare try to gaslight me about this. $30,000, Brandon. That's what you've taken from me since we got married. Taken? His face darkened. We're married. What's yours is mine, isn't it? Isn't that what you said in your vows? From downstairs, I heard the front door open, followed by Nancy's voice calling out, Of course. My mother-in-law had a key, and she never bothered to announce her visits. Brandon? Jessica? Are you home? Brandon's expression shifted to panic. Don't say anything to Mom about this. Please, let me explain everything tomorrow when we're both calmer. I stood up, gathering my laptop and phone. Oh, I'm perfectly calm, and I think it's time for a family meeting. Jessica, wait! He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in harder than necessary. You don't want to do this. I looked down at his hand, then back up at his face. In that moment, I saw something I'd never noticed before. Fear. Not of losing me, but of losing control. Actually, Brandon, I do. I pulled free from his grip. Because I have a feeling this is just the beginning of what I'm going to find. And your mother should be very interested in hearing about it. As I headed for the stairs, Nancy's heels clicked on the marble floor below. Brandon's footsteps followed close behind me, his breathing heavy with barely contained anger. The perfect family facade was about to crack, and I intended to shatter it completely. Sometimes the most dangerous moves are the ones we make with our eyes wide open. Nancy's perfectly manicured nails drummed against our marble kitchen island as she examined the bank statement spread before her. Darling, I don't see what all the fuss is about. This is standard business practice. I leaned forward, matching her steady gaze. Standard practice would include a lease agreement, documentation, transparency. Not a shell company created days before my wedding. Shell company? Eric's voice cracked slightly as he joined us at the island. That's quite an accusation, Jessica. Brandon hovered behind his parents, his earlier panic now replaced with a smug certainty that made my skin crawl. The family united, just as they always did. Let's discuss something more pleasant, Nancy suggested, sliding the papers aside. Like the investment opportunity Eric mentioned last week, the Collins family has always had an eye for profitable ventures. And with your connections at Morgan Innovations? You mean my father's company? I interrupted, watching their reactions carefully. The one Brandon's been trying to get promoted in for the past 6 months? Eric cleared his throat. Speaking of which, Robert mentioned considering Brandon for the VP position in development. That would be quite the step up. Did he? I kept my voice neutral, though my fingers clenched around my coffee mug. Interesting, since I oversee all executive appointments and that position isn't even open. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Brandon's face flushed red, but before he could speak, Nancy reached across the counter and patted my hand. Her diamond tennis bracelet caught the light, probably worth more than most people's monthly salary. Family helps family, Jessica. Surely you understand that. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. We've welcomed you so warmly, included you in everything. The least you could do is show some reciprocity. Like the $30,000 of reciprocity you've already taken? Brandon slammed his hand on the counter. That money was for our future, our family's future. Your family's future, I corrected him. Tell me, does that future include the meetings you've been having with Melissa's divorce attorney? The silence that followed was deafening. Nancy's hand withdrew from mine as if burned. Eric's face went pale. How did you... Brandon started. No, I pulled out my phone, scrolling through emails. Funny thing about technology, when you use your work email to schedule meetings with a lawyer who specializes in high net worth divorce cases, it leaves a trail, especially when you're using company servers I have access to. Now, Jessica, Eric stepped forward, his businessman persona taking over. Let's not do anything rash. We can work this out as a family. Family? I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. Is that what you call this elaborate con? The devoted husband, the welcoming in-laws, all while you're planning to take everything you can get? Nancy's composure cracked slightly. You ungrateful little... Mother! Brandon's warning cut through the air. He moved closer to me, his voice dropping to that gentle tone he used when he wanted something. Jess, baby, you're upset. I get it, but you're making connections that aren't there. Let me explain everything. I stood up, gathering the bank statements. You know what's interesting about Collins Holdings LLC? It's not the only company registered that week. There were 3 others, all connected to accounts I can't access. Care to explain those? The color drained from Brandon's face. Behind him, Eric grabbed Nancy's arm as she swayed slightly. You've been investigating us? Brandon's charm vanished, replaced by something darker. Going through private records? Spying on emails? I learned from the best. I headed for the door, pausing to look back at them. Oh, and Brandon? Don't bother coming to the office Monday. Your access has been revoked. You can't do that! Nancy's voice rose shrilly. Eric, tell her she can't do that. Actually, I can. And I did. I smiled, feeling a strange calm settle over me. Consider it my first act as the new chief operating officer, a position my father announced this morning. Funny how none of you congratulated me. I left them there, their shocked faces burning into my memory. As I drove away, my phone buzzed with messages from Brandon, but I ignored them. Instead, I pulled up my father's number. Dad, remember when you said trust but verify? We need to talk about the Collins family, all of them. The game they started was about to change, and this time, I'd be the one making the rules. The security guard at Morgan Innovations barely glanced at Tyler Collins' student ID before waving him through. At 16, my nephew looked enough like his uncle Brandon to pass without question, especially at this hour when the building was nearly empty. I watched through the glass walls of my office as he navigated the maze of cubicles, his shoulders hunched under the weight of his backpack. Thanks for meeting me here, I said when he finally reached my door. I know it's late. Tyler dropped his backpack on the floor, the thud echoing in the empty space. Mom's at another charity event. She won't notice I'm gone. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I found something you need to see. What kind of something? Instead of answering, he pulled out his phone and placed it on my desk. A video played. Brandon and Melissa in what looked like a hotel bar, heads close together over drinks. I followed them last week, Tyler said, after I overheard Mom talking about the apartment scam. My throat tightened as Brandon's voice came through the speaker. Once the divorce is final, we'll have enough leverage to force a buyout. Jessica won't know what hit her until it's too late. Melissa's laugh, sharp and cruel. Nancy's already lined up 3 investors ready to take controlling interest once we push the stock price down. Poor little rich girl thinking she could handle running Daddy's company. I stopped the video, my hands steady despite the rage building inside me. How long have you known? About their plans? A few weeks? Tyler finally looked up, his face a mix of guilt and determination. About what kind of people they really are. My whole life. A notification popped up on my computer screen. Brandon trying to access his locked account again. Third time today. I dismissed it with a click. They're going to destroy everything my father built, I said, more to myself than Tyler. Unless I stop them first. There's more. Tyler reached into his backpack again, pulling out a USB drive. Mom keeps all her important stuff in a locked drawer, but she forgets I learned to pick locks at summer camp 2 years ago. I plugged in the drive, and dozens of folders appeared. Financial records, emails, photographs, a digital paper trail of the Collins family's schemes stretching back months before my wedding. Why are you showing me this? I asked, studying Tyler's face. They're your family. Because they're wrong. His voice cracked slightly, and because I heard what they're planning for tomorrow's board meeting. My blood ran cold. What about tomorrow's meeting? Uncle Brandon made copies of your security badges. Aunt Nancy has some guy from IT helping them access the main servers during the quarterly report presentation. They're going to... A noise in the hallway cut him off. We both turned to see Brandon standing in the doorway, his face twisted with fury. Tyler, get in the car! Now! Brandon's voice was deadly quiet. No! Tyler stood his ground, moving slightly closer to my desk. I'm done helping you hurt people. Brandon stepped into the office, letting the door swing shut behind him. This isn't about hurting anyone. This is about taking what we deserve. What this family deserves. By stealing? I stood up, positioning myself between Brandon and Tyler. By manipulating everyone around you? By playing the game the way it's meant to be played. His smile was cold. Did you really think your father built this company by playing nice? Ask him about the Morgan Innovations IPO sometime. Ask him where the seed money really came from. I felt Tyler tense behind me. Whatever you're planning for tomorrow, it won't work. It already has. Brandon pulled out his phone, showing me a screen full of text messages. The board members are very interested in some irregularities they've discovered in the company's recent acquisitions. Irregularities that lead right back to the new COO. My mind raced, connecting dots I should have seen earlier. The fake documentation, the mysterious investors, the timing of my promotion. They'd been setting me up from the start. Tyler, I said without taking my eyes off Brandon, go home. Use the back exit. But, now. I heard him gather his things and leave. But Brandon and I remained locked in our standoff, the weight of tomorrow's confrontation hanging between us. You should have just played along, Jess. Brandon's voice almost sounded regretful. It would have been so much easier. Easier isn't always better. I reached for my phone. And you should have remembered who actually built the security systems you're trying to hack. The game was changing again, but this time I had an ace they didn't know about. And tomorrow, they'd learn exactly what it meant to underestimate me. The boardroom felt like a tomb at 5 a.m. I sat in darkness, reviewing security footage from the past month on my tablet, watching my husband and his family plot my downfall in 30-second increments. The latest clip showed Brandon entering the server room with someone from IT, exactly as Tyler had warned. My phone buzzed. A text from my father. Meeting moved up to 7 a.m., Nancy's request. Of course it was. They wanted to catch me unprepared. The door opened, flooding the room with fluorescent light. I thought I might find you here. Eric Collins stood in the doorway, looking older than I'd ever seen him. We need to talk. About how your family plans to frame me for financial misconduct? I kept scrolling through footage. Or about how Brandon's been selling company secrets to our competitors. Eric's sharp intake of breath told me I'd scored a direct hit. You don't understand the whole picture. Then enlighten me. I finally looked up. Explain why your wife orchestrated this entire marriage just to get access to Morgan Innovations. He moved to the window, staring out at the pre-dawn city. Nancy, she's always wanted more. When your father beat us out for the government contract 15 years ago, it nearly destroyed us. This was supposed to be about recovering what we lost. By destroying my life? By evening the score. He turned back, his expression haunted. But it went too far. Brandon wasn't supposed to... He stopped abruptly. I stood, my chair scraping against the floor. Wasn't supposed to what? A new voice answered from the doorway. Wasn't supposed to fall in love with you. Melissa stepped into the room, holding a manila envelope. That wasn't part of Mom's plan. But he did, and it made everything complicated. Love? I laughed, the sound harsh in the quiet room. Is that what you call emptying my accounts and planning my professional execution? No, that's what I call survival. She tossed the envelope onto the table. Mom's dying, Jessica. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe less. This whole thing, the marriage, the companies, the board meeting. It's her last shot at securing our future. The envelope contained medical records, hospital bills, insurance rejections. My hands shook as I read them. Why are you showing me this? Because Tyler's right. Melissa sank into a chair. This has to stop. But if you expose everything now, you won't just destroy Brandon, you'll kill our mother faster. The stress, the public humiliation. She trailed off, looking at her father. Eric nodded slowly. We're asking you to wait, just until she dies? The words tasted like ash. So Brandon can play the grieving son while systematically dismantling my family's company? No. Melissa pulled out her phone, showing me a series of text messages. So we can help you stop him instead. My world tilted sideways. What? Brandon's gone rogue. The original plan was just about money, getting enough to cover Mom's treatments and secure the family's future. But he's made deals we didn't approve. Dangerous ones. Eric moved closer, his voice urgent. He's meeting with Victor Petrov tonight. You know what that means. I did. Petrov Enterprises had been trying to hostile take over Morgan Innovations for years. They'd stop at nothing to get our technology. If Brandon gives Petrov what he wants, Melissa continued, everyone loses. Not just your family or ours. Thousands of employees, partners, clients. My tablet chimed with an incoming email. The board meeting agenda, updated to include a vote on new security protocols. Protocols that would give Brandon's IT contact unlimited system access. The meeting starts in 2 hours, I said, my mind racing. Why should I trust either of you? Melissa stood, gathering her things. You shouldn't. But ask yourself this. Why would Tyler risk everything to warn you if we were all still working together? She left, leaving Eric and me in charged silence. Through the windows, I could see the sun beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of blood red. Your choice, Jessica, Eric said quietly. Revenge now, or justice later. I looked down at Nancy's medical records, then at the security footage still playing silently on my tablet. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy isn't the one trying to destroy you. It's the one making you question whether you should destroy them back. The board meeting would start soon, and I had to decide what kind of justice I was really fighting for. The board meeting erupted into chaos the moment I played the recording of Brandon's conversation with Victor Petrov. 12 faces turned from the projection screen to stare at my husband, who sat frozen at the other end of the table, his perfect mask finally cracking. This is a fabrication! Nancy's voice cut through the murmurs. Despite the pallor of her skin, so obvious now that I knew what to look for, she maintained her iron grip on composure. Jessica is clearly attempting to... To what, Mother? Brandon's laugh held an edge of hysteria. To expose the truth? Isn't that what you taught us? Always control the narrative? My father leaned forward, his expression carved from stone. The timestamps and metadata are authentic. The question isn't whether this meeting happened, Brandon. The question is why you thought you could sell my company's security protocols to our biggest threat. Your company? Brandon stood, sending his chair crashing backward. You mean the company you built by destroying families like mine? Ask Jessica about the files I found in her office. About what really happened 15 years ago. I felt the weight of the USB drive in my pocket. The one Melissa had given me, containing proof of not just Brandon's betrayal, but older sins as well. Sins that belonged to both our families. This isn't about the past, I said, keeping my voice steady. This is about you meeting Petrov tonight to hand over access to our entire infrastructure. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Eric caught my eye from across the room, his slight nod confirming what we'd discussed earlier. Sometimes justice required sacrifice. Brandon, Nancy reached for her son's arm. What have you done? What you taught me to do. He shrugged her off. But I improved on your plan. Why settle for scraps when we could take everything? By selling us to Petrov? I stood, matching his stance. A man who's known for destroying every company he touches? By securing our future! His fist slammed the table. While you all play your petty games of corporate politics, I'm thinking bigger. Petrov offers freedom from all of this. From the lies, the manipulations, the family obligations. The family obligations that paid for your mother's cancer treatments? The words left my mouth before I could stop them. The room went deathly silent. Nancy swayed in her chair, her carefully maintained facade crumbling as all eyes turned to her. "How dare you?" Brandon whispered, but I could see the shock in his eyes. He hadn't known. "Your sister told me everything." I moved around the table, closing the distance between us. "About the medical bills, the rejected insurance claims, the real reason behind this whole scheme. But you went rogue, didn't you? Decided to play both sides?" "Jessica," my father warned, but I kept going. "You're meeting Petrov tonight to sell him more than just security protocols. You're giving him everything. Customer data, research and development, classified government contracts. Enough to destroy not just Morgan Innovations, but everyone connected to it." Brandon's smile turned cruel. "Prove it." I pulled out my phone, dialing a number on speaker. Tyler's voice filled the room. "Uncle Brandon? I'm at the coffee shop across from Petrov Enterprises. I can see you through the window. Should I tell Aunt Jessica you're early for your meeting?" The blood drained from Brandon's face as security officers entered the boardroom. "Not company security, federal agents." "Brandon Collins," the lead agent stepped forward. "You're under arrest for corporate espionage and attempted sale of classified information." As they led him away, Brandon locked eyes with me. "You think this is justice? Wait until they learn what your father did to get his start. How many families he destroyed." "The difference," I said quietly, "is that I'm willing to face the consequences of my family's actions. Are you?" Nancy collapsed then, whether from genuine distress or calculated timing, I couldn't tell. As medical personnel rushed in, I slipped the USB drive onto the table in front of my father. "Everything's on there," I told him. "Everything both families did. Your choice what happens next." I left the boardroom as chaos continued to unfold, my phone buzzing with a text from Melissa. "Mom's asking for you. Says she wants to make a deal. Some victories feel like defeats. Some justice tastes like ash." But as I headed toward Nancy's hospital room, I realized this was never about winning. It was about choosing which truth to tell and which sins to forgive. Nancy's hospital room smelled of lilies and lies. She lay propped against stark white pillows, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, yet her eyes still held that calculating gleam. "You've destroyed my son," she said as I closed the door behind me. "Brandon destroyed himself." I remained standing, keeping my distance. "The federal agents found everything." "Did they?" She adjusted her IV line with practiced precision. "Or did they find what you wanted them to find?" My phone buzzed. Another message from my father, probably about the board's emergency session. I ignored it. "What do you want, Nancy?" "To make a trade." She reached for a folder on her bedside table, hands trembling slightly. "Your father's original dealings with the Collins family. The real records, not the sanitized version in that USB drive you have." My throat went dry. "How did you know about the drive?" Her smile was razor thin. "Because I put it there. Melissa isn't the only one who can play both sides." The door opened and Eric stepped in, looking grim. "It's done. The board voted to suspend all operations pending federal investigation." "Of both companies," Nancy added, watching my reaction. "Your father's and ours." The realization hit like a physical blow. "You planned this. All of it. Brandon's arrest, the evidence, even your collapse in the boardroom. Brandon was always too ambitious for his own good." Nancy's voice hardened. "He needed to be stopped before he destroyed everything. But he wasn't wrong about one thing. Your father's hands aren't clean either." Eric moved to stand beside his wife's bed. "The federal investigation will uncover everything, Jessica. Unless I help you bury it all." The words tasted bitter. "That's your deal? My silence for yours? Better than watching both our families burn." Nancy held out the folder. "Choose quickly. The agents are probably already at your father's office." My phone buzzed again. Not my father this time, but Tyler. "Don't trust them. Check the security footage from last night. Mom wasn't alone in her room." I pulled out my tablet, accessing the hospital's security feed. There, in grainy black and white, I watched as Viktor Petrov himself slipped into Nancy's room at 3 a.m. "You're still playing both sides," I said, turning the tablet to show them. "Making deals with Petrov even while selling out your own son." Nancy's mask slipped for just a moment, showing something like respect. You really are your father's daughter. No, I stepped toward the door. I'm trying to be better than all of us. If you leave now, Eric warned, everything comes out. Everything. Good. I reached for the handle. Maybe it's time we all face the truth. Nancy's monitor began beeping faster. You'll lose everything. The company, your reputation, your father's legacy. I already lost everything when I trusted this family. I turned back one last time. The difference is, I'm willing to rebuild from honest ground. As I walked away, their voices faded behind me, replaced by the steady stream of notifications on my phone. The stock was plummeting. The press was gathering outside both companies' headquarters. My father wasn't answering his phone. In the hospital parking lot, I found Tyler waiting by my car. They'll never forgive you, he said quietly. I know. I unlocked the doors. Get in. Where are we going? To do what should have been done 15 years ago. I started the engine. To tell the truth about both our families. My phone rang. Brandon, calling from detention. I let it go to voicemail, already knowing what he'd say. More threats, more accusations, more attempts to manipulate. The truth would cost me everything I'd thought mattered. Wealth, status, family name. The investigation would tear apart both companies, exposing decades of corruption and betrayal. Nancy would make sure of that. But as Tyler and I drove toward the federal building, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Sometimes hitting bottom means finally finding solid ground to stand on. They'll try to stop us, Tyler said, clutching a backpack full of his own evidence. I know. I pressed the accelerator harder, but some prices are worth paying. Behind us, hospital security rushed toward Nancy's room, alarms blaring. Ahead, news vans gathered like vultures around our destination. And somewhere in between, the truth waited, ugly, costly, but finally, undeniably free. The federal building's interview room felt like a pressure cooker. My father sat across from me, his face ashen as he reviewed the documents Tyler and I had brought. Outside, through the one-way glass, I could see agents conferring over copies of the same evidence. You could have come to me first, he said finally, his voice rough. Like the Collins family came to you 15 years ago? I pushed Nancy's folder across the table. Before you bankrupted them and bought their patents? He didn't touch the folder. I did what I had to do to build something lasting, something I thought you understood. The door opened. Brandon, still in custody, was led in by 2 agents. His designer suit had been replaced by standard-issue clothing, but his smirk remained intact. Family reunion? He took the seat beside my father. How touching. Tyler, who hadn't spoken since we arrived, suddenly stood. Tell them about Petrov's offshore accounts, Uncle Brandon, the ones Mom's been using. Brandon's smirk faltered. Sit down, kid. You're in over your head. No. Tyler pulled out his phone. I'm just getting started. He played a recording. Nancy's voice, clear and cold, discussing payment terms with Petrov while Brandon could be heard agreeing in the background. My father's hands clenched on the table. You were working with Petrov even before the merger talks? Everyone was working an angle. Brandon leaned back, a dangerous glint in his eye. Your daughter included. Ask her about the security protocols she modified last week, about how she made sure I'd take the fall. That's not, I started, but the door opened again. Melissa burst in, ignoring the agent's protests. Mom's gone! She checked herself out of the hospital and emptied the emergency accounts. All of them! The room erupted. Brandon lunged across the table. Agents rushed forward. My father shouted for order. But through the chaos, I noticed Tyler quietly sliding his phone toward me. On the screen, a text message from Nancy. Storage Unit 247, Airport Plaza. Come alone or everything burns. I caught Tyler's eye. He gave me the slightest nod. Everyone stop! I stood, commanding attention. This isn't about money anymore. It's not even about justice. It's about breaking a cycle that's destroyed both our families. Spare us the moral high ground, Brandon spat. You're just as guilty as the rest of us. You're right. The admission silenced the room. I wanted revenge. I wanted to hurt you like you hurt me. But now? I looked at Tyler, then my father, then finally Brandon. Now I want the truth. All of it. The truth? Brandon laughed bitterly. The truth is, your father destroyed my family once and you're finishing the job. The truth is, everyone in this room is guilty of something. The truth, Tyler interrupted, is in that storage unit with my mother, along with enough evidence to implicate Petrov and half the tech industry in a decade of corporate espionage. Brandon went pale. My father stood abruptly. Jessica, don't! But I was already moving toward the door. Tyler, show them everything we found. Dad, it's time to come clean about the Collins patents. Brandon? I paused, looking at the man I'd once loved. I'm sorry it had to end this way. Jessica, Brandon called as I reached the door. She'll never give you what you want. She'll burn it all down first. Maybe. I turned back one last time. But sometimes you have to burn it all down to build something better. The agents parted to let me through, already mobilizing teams based on Tyler's revelations. Behind me, I could hear Brandon finally breaking, spilling details about Petrov's broader conspiracy. My father's voice joined in, decades of secrets finally seeing daylight. My phone buzzed with coordinates, Nancy's last move in our deadly game. She thought I was coming to negotiate, to protect what remained of our family's reputations. She didn't understand that I'd stopped playing by the old rules. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's forcing everyone, including yourself, to finally face the truth. I stepped into the elevator, leaving behind the sounds of confession and consequence. Nancy was waiting, thinking she held all the cards. But for the first time since this started, I knew exactly what I was fighting for. And it wasn't revenge anymore. Storage Unit 247 stood open, its contents illuminated by harsh fluorescent lighting. Nancy sat in a folding chair among stacks of boxes and hard drives, an oxygen tank beside her. She didn't look surprised to see me. You brought backup, she observed as distant sirens grew closer. Did you really think I wouldn't? She smiled thinly. No. You're smarter than Brandon ever gave you credit for. Her hands rested on a laptop. Everything's here. 15 years of secrets, schemes, and corporate warfare. Enough to destroy both our families completely. That's not why I came. No? She raised an eyebrow. Then why did you? I moved closer, studying the woman who'd orchestrated so much pain. Because you taught me something important. About family, about legacy, about truth. And what's that? That none of it matters if it's built on lies. The sirens were getting closer. Nancy's fingers tightened on the laptop. You know what's on here? The real story of how your father acquired those patents? How many lives he ruined? I know. And so will everyone else. I gestured to the hidden microphone I was wearing. It's already streaming to the federal investigators. For the first time, genuine shock crossed her face. You're sacrificing everything. Your company, your inheritance, to break the cycle. I sat in the second folding chair. Tyler showed me what real courage looks like. Standing up to your own family when they're wrong. Tyler. Something softened in her expression. He was always different. Better than the rest of us. Red and blue lights flashed outside. Nancy's hand moved to her oxygen tank, adjusting the flow. You know what's funny? I started all this to secure my family's future. Instead, I destroyed it. Not destroyed, I corrected. Changed. Tyler's testimony will help reduce Brandon's sentence. Melissa's cooperating with the investigation. Even Dad's agreed to restructure the company, return the patents to their original inventors. And me? That depends on what you do next. She looked at the laptop, then at the storage unit's contents. A lifetime of leverage and secrets. Outside, car doors slammed, footsteps approached. I'm dying anyway, she said quietly. What's left to lose? The chance to do one right thing. For Tyler, if no one else. Nancy was silent for a long moment. Then she opened the laptop, typed briefly, and turned it toward me. The password to decrypt everything. And, she hesitated, a confession. About Petrov, about Brandon, about all of it. Federal agents flooded the unit as Nancy finished speaking. She didn't resist as they led her out, her oxygen tank wheeling behind her, but she paused at the entrance. Why did you really come alone? She asked. You could have sent the agents first. Because someone once told me that family helps family. I met her gaze, even when it means helping them face the consequences of their actions. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. You really are nothing like us, are you? No, I agreed. I'm trying to be better. Later, as evidence teams cataloged the unit's contents, my phone buzzed with a message from Tyler. Found something in Mom's old accounts. Check your bank balance. I did. There it was. $30,000. Transferred anonymously. The exact amount Brandon had stolen. Returned by a 16-year-old boy who chose truth over family loyalty. My father was waiting outside, looking older but somehow lighter. The board's meeting tomorrow. We're going to rebuild, the right way this time. I know. I watched Nancy's ambulance drive away. But first, we have some apologies to make, and some wrongs to right. He nodded, understanding. In the distance, dawn was breaking over the city, painting everything in new light. Not a happy ending. Those don't exist in real life. But maybe something better, a chance to build something honest from the ashes of necessary destruction. I thought of Brandon in his cell, Nancy in her hospital room, and Tyler in his quiet courage. Sometimes family isn't what you're born into or what you marry into. Sometimes it's what you choose to build, one truth at a time. The storage unit stood empty now, its secrets exposed to light. But the real treasure wasn't in the evidence or the confessions. It was in the choice to face truth over comfort, justice over revenge, and the future over the past. Some would call it karma. I called it grace.